Thanks for coming. And before we start on our chapters, I am going to say a few words about our book and Jill. I started writing my story of only my parents, Chris and Ida Olson in LaRonge, and I had quite a few pages on it, and just going along.
I'll just start, and first of all, so my name is Jerry. I'm the Programming and Outreach Coordinator here at the museum, and we are proud to say that we are on Treaty 6 territory, homeland of the Dakota and Métis Nations. If you need the washroom, it's just around this wall. Right here is the washrooms. Please help yourself to coffee and cookies whenever you're ready to have it. We're so pleased to have Anne Hyrniuk and Jill Gracie here to talk about their book. They're going to do the presentation, and are you okay if they interrupt you with questions, or do you want them to save them till the end?
They can.
Okay.
And if I can't answer, Jill will. My right and left hand most of the time.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Okay. First and foremost, I was going to just say how I started. I had no idea I was going to be writing a book on the history of LaRonge. I was just writing about my two parents. And it shows up in the book as one chapter. Jill agreed that I should put that in there. But anyhow, one day I had been working on my book of my mom and dad for a couple of years, just here and there, writing to my aunts and uncles, because some of them live in the States, and they had written little books about their home country. Then Jill came knocking at the door, and she says, "I hear you're writing a book." Yes, I am. Now, if you don't know Jill, I must tell you, she has written a newspaper for 10 years. She has done magazines for the government called Opportunity North, also Dinosa. If there's anything, she came to LaRonge in the 1960s. I was born there in 36, so I could tell her the old stories. And she came in and filled in the newer part. And we got along very well and had no problems, but she warrants a big clapping for all she did for us. The publisher, she arranged the pictures, she did in the proper setting. I did not want pictures all in one page. They should be near whoever I'm writing about. You know, it should be spread out. And then we just sat down and we got a plan. Well, where are we going to start? Well, we should start at the beginning. If it's a history, you start at 1900, when there was nothing in LaRonge. Nobody lived in the town of LaRonge. They came there in the summertime, but they never stayed there year-round. There was no store, there was no cafe, there was no hotel, there was nothing. It was just a settlement for the people to get together in the summertime. So anyhow, we decided we were going to start at 1900, and that we did, by just talking to people. And that was took more time than anything. It's, you know, because they couldn't remember. It would be their grandparents that I was talking about. So if I talked to a younger man or woman, it would be my grandma lived in 1900, or 1920, but I didn't. So I can't tell you. Yeah. So anyhow, that's how it started. And we went up to 1950. Well, there's a lot of things really happened in those years. So she says, oh well, we'll try. And we kept adding on to 1960 until 79 came along. So we started from 00 to 1979. And we're very, very proud of all the work that we did with it. The books, the pictures we collected from different people, and stories from different people. So we hope that we covered most everything. We're sorry I missed at least 2 or 3 of very good people that still lived in LaRonge, but not right in the town, and it slipped my mind. So I made some horrible mistakes. But on the whole, we did a very good job. Before we started, there was a book called Our Roots, which was written by a teacher by the name of Alf Wiens. And Alf Wiens did a good job. He did a very, very good job. We were quite pleased with what he did. But they had a committee. They had various people working for them. They received financial assistance, you know, for the Northern Lights school and whatever. So we didn't have those facilities. It was just Jill and I. Have you got pictures? Have you got this? You know?
She's got a basement full of pictures.
And so does Jill. So anyhow, we managed. So then, but I must say, I was very pleased of looking at this, and you can't help but, you have to access things. And we did access some of them, but we did not copy word for word, because we knew the teachers as well as they did. You know? And this there, Roots, was published in 1981. So they didn't go any further than that. You know, and we continued on. And they did not, we went into in-depth study. That's my son Jim, our son Jim. So anyhow, we looked at the pictures, sorted things out, started where we would start in 1900. 1900 took us at least 8 to 10 months, at least, eh? And even ongoing, because nobody could remember. And partly the reason was, how come I could remember? I couldn't even myself understand, how come I can remember these, and these ladies are the same age as me? But then I remembered, I lived in LaRonge all year round, and they went to the trap line. When you go to the trap line, you miss out on who came to town, etc., etc. Okay? So, but they helped in every way they could. They told us the stories of what their parents knew. Yes. So anyhow, chapter 1 started with the fur trade. Like I say, there was absolutely nothing in 1900. It was 1904. So, chapter 1, I'll just go by the way the book is written. The traditional, we wrote about the traditional lifestyle, which the local people all lived the similar type. They were all trappers. There was no other business, no other work to do. So they were all trappers. And then Then the churches, first to arrive was the Reverend Freres store. It was located on what we call Nun Street in LaRonge. And that was a French company. They were there before the Hudson's Bay Company in proper LaRonge. They were located in Kenderdine Island on the northeast shore of LaRonge Lake in the 1800s, 1797, for a year or two, and then for a year or two, it would depend on the price of muskrats and beaver. Then they moved to what we call Wasasik. Wasasik means a little bay, and it's about 3 miles just south of LaRonge. That's where they built a big complex for the Hudson Bay store. In those days, a big complex. Like they had a warehouse, a living quarters for the staff, for the manager and his wife. And they had a store. And they had, they probably had a horse or two. And they had a big garden. I know that. My mother lived with them when she was 10, 12 years old because she wanted to learn to read and write a little bit. And her mother was dying. So that's what happened there. We've got a list of all the, in the book, you will find the location of the churches. There was a little church down Big Stone River. LaRonge has the Montreal River comes through Big Stone Lake and then into LaRonge. And down at Big Stone, on the other end, was we call that area Little Hills, and they set it up there first with a small church and a small house for a person that had taken training in Prince Albert. And he was actually from Samuel Abraham was his name. And he was from Moose Lake area. And he was teaching students, but they could not stay there all year round. They would just come there in the summertime because the parents were still going out to the trap line. So the school could not operate as they wanted to, because the parents had to make some money. So then three of them decided, Reverend Archdeacon Mackay, Sanderson, and Samuel Abraham, all came to LaRonge looking for an area to build a bigger school. And they built a bigger school. They called it the Mackay School because he was the instigator of building this here, and he even grew some oats there, for his. But it was quite a. That was the first 1900s when it was first starting. Rebellion Furs was the first store, like I said, and it was built by a Norman Irving. He was from the Manitoba area and had come to Prince Albert and done some work for Rebellion Furs, and he came up and built a huge store area, living quarters, storage for his horses, for freighting, and they lived on Nun Street. And a few years later, then the Hudson Bay came from Wasasee into Lac La Ronge. And then when people start coming into Lac La Ronge, the odd person would move in there because they could work to help the storekeeper maybe supply him with wood or fish or whatever. So that's how the town of LaRonge first started, with Rebellion Freres and the church came in, no, 1914, eh?
Church was 1909.
1914 was it, yeah, 1909. And there was another little store came, but it was a little bit later. C.M. Smith was his name, private owner. So there's very little. My dad bought the store when he came into LaRonge and settled there, you know. And that was the basic setup for the start of LaRonge. That's how it started. And that's all in our first part of this book. Jill, was there any other things that I slipped? No? Okay. The next section we wrote about was my family, which I had started on my little book, you know, but I couldn't write a book. I had never had any training about writing a book, or I was just writing stories, you know. And how else does a book start? By writing stories. So that's how we started. And the second section of the book, it's in the agenda, was all about my family. All about my family setting in. My mom was born in LaRonge. Her dad was Roderick Mackay, and her mother was an Angelic Mackenzie from Stanley Mission. So that's where my grandmother was from. And my dad was from Denmark. But he had come to Iowa and couldn't stand the heat. He had an aunt and uncle there. Came to Winnipeg, came to Viking, and then he wanted to go fishing. So he came up with Palmer Hansen, you know, who had a house just north of Prince Albert. And they fished together on Birch Island. And they stayed there, and Dad would work for the Hudson Bay store in the springtime and in the wintertime when they couldn't fish on the lake. Okay? And that's how my family started. They got married in 1923, and the minister from the church there was stationed in LaRonge, but in the summertime he would go up to, they called it English River, but it became Stanley Mission. And so they had to paddle up there to get married. And they paddled back. And that's how my mom and dad got married.
They must have really loved each other.
Yeah.
They got married in the old church there then?
Yeah. Right in
The Holy Trinity Church or on the land?
the Anglican Church in Stanley Mission. Yeah, yeah. Reverend Hives was their minister.
Right.
Yeah. So anyhow, they got married there and came back, and of course they went trapping. You know, that's all anybody could do. If they weren't fishing, they were trapping. And they went with her parents, Roderick Mackay. And when they had the children, then my older sister, Margaret, was 12 years older than me, and I had 2 brothers. And then she had 2 more children that passed away. But they decided to move into LaRonge because the children were ready for school. So that's how they moved into LaRonge, and he bought this little store. There's a big long story about Kirsten Idols, and because I'm proud of them. That's my mom and dad. And so I insisted that we have all that. And there's lots of pictures in the entire book, has lots of pictures. In next thing to come to LaRonge was a policeman, and his name was Thomas Cart, and his dad was the Hudson Bay Company. They owned, his father was in charge of a large area. And Thomas came to LaRonge. He got married there, and he did a very good job. You know, all by himself with a dog team to go check on people if there was a problem of any kind. Nobody had horses then. I think the Rebellion hers first, and the second school had horses. But otherwise there was no horses then. Just dog teams and canoes. And the canoes were birch bark. You must remember in those days, they were birch bark canoes. Nobody had a canoe of any kind. The canoes were made by the people themselves. And they'd have to use the roots of the trees to sew the birch bark, and they also made their tents in birch bark. Remember, they'd have to find a long, large birch tree to get enough of that birch bark. And that birch bark was used to carry water, to cook in, and to pick berries with. You could cook it if you didn't have it directly on the heat, but close by. Yeah? And in baskets, and it was fantastic what they could do with their birch bark. And yeah, those old people were. Is there any questions or anybody has?
When did people start doing birch bark biting? You know, I understand older women, or we have a piece that was done by, I think it's Angelique Morasti, but it's the biting, you know, they turned it into sort of art.
And
When did that start?
I don't know. Angelique Morasti from Pelican was the first one that I've ever heard of.
Okay.
And I know there's lots in Stanley. Lois Jordan's mother used to do that too all the time, about the same time as Angelique Morasti. But I can't remember when it started. It was a decoration, you know what I mean? And they did their decorating on the birch bark with just dyeing the roots of a tree and punching holes and making flowers on there inside.
Wow.
Yeah, it was hard work to make anything, but they did it without any help. Yeah, until the stores came along, and you know, then they were able to get knives and hammers and axes, you know, and bump each other on the head. You know, it was interesting times, you know, yes?
You said your parents got married in Stanley,
Yes,
and they paddled from LaRonge.
yes.
Did they go down the Rapid River over to Stoyak and on to Stanley?
No, you go past, huh?
Four Portages?
Four Portages.
No, Four
You're
Portages.
Four Portages,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, Four
Okay.
Portages.
Mhm.
I've gone on that canoe trip too. I used to draw. I did 7 years with grade 11 and 12. They had to get their physical education. And I went on those trips every year for 7 years.
Portages are when they make those, logs, like, and then they push the boat through the bushes to get to the other side of the water, right?
Yeah, they were pack
Logs.
it. If it was birch bark canoes those days, it was, and then they got smaller canoes. Pardon? Sorry?
They carry them most.
Oh, they carried them most. The men were very strong
Oh, the
too.
canoes, yeah.
Yeah, when were made out of,
And they make a lot of trees, right?
yes, yeah.
It's amazing. Well, I've seen one up there. Is it up over there?
It's on there, yes.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
neat.
Yeah. That's- I saw one in Yellowknife too, they got one of those, yeah.
The trees are much bigger over there, right?
Yeah, yeah. So that's, policing. There was many police came. First it was, Thomas, like I say, Thomas Clark, and he married a lady from LaRonge, a Mackenzie, Aurora Mackenzie, and they had, I think 5 or 6 children, and then they moved away and took trapping. And a Wenzel came. Wenzel was from Prince Albert. No,
Yeah.
not Wenzel. Wenzel was from the south, but his wife was from Prince Albert, from the Clouston area.
Right.
And she was a Mackay.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, okay? Yeah, mm-hmm. She was a Mackay, yeah. And my mother was related to all those Mackays from the, because her father was Roderick Mackay, cousin of Angus Mackay. You know, so they're all related. Yeah. So anyhow, there was also a Clot, K-L-O-D-T, another policeman came in there. Okay? But I'll let you read all that stuff. Air travel started in we had a magistrate too. Magistrate Lucier came up every spring. Well, no, he came up many times. But when he came in the spring, he always brought us seeds for the kids, you know, so that they could help planting in the gardens. You know, the police would issue, or the treaty party would issue. The treaty party, the first treaty parties used to come from Prince Albert. They would go straight to Cumberland House, down the Saskatchewan River. Then they would go up to Churchill River, go down to Buffalo Narrows, the Air Cross area, come back, go to Waskesiu, and then come on Montreal Lake to give the treaty to LaRonge. So LaRonge would get the treaty in September, and it had started in June, as soon as the ice went away. But until they built that road, the cart trail from Waskesiu to Montreal Lake. You know? So there's lots of changes in many ways, shape, and forms. Air travel started in 1926. 1926, yes. We had many different types of airplanes came, but the first ones were taking photos of, for aerial photos, for mapping. And a local guy, Norman McCauley, from LaRonge, he was only around 10 years old and passed the films to they were busy and flying this big old clunky old plane, but they're getting around. They took over 8,000 or 80,000 photos the first year. That was a lot of pictures.
So were they all like float planes, like would land on a?
Oh, they're all,
Yeah.
that's the only kind of plane that there was.
They're all
Yeah.
cockpit planes, they landed actually on their hull.
Yeah, belly flopping, you know.
There's some pictures in there.
Yeah, there's lots of pictures in there. And we've had at least 16 or 18 airlines working out of LaRonge in some way, shape, or form. The last one was Osprey Airlines, you know, with Gary Thompson. But if you start back with M&C and all those, we've had some stationed there and some visiting there and some gassing up there to go up to Goldfields. You know, so it was a very, very busy little town for airplanes when they started. And and then they went into tourism, started, so the planes were used for that, for freighting, for hauling the mail. The freighting was about the next stage. I'm kind of jumping around here, but they came across, we've got a picture of R.D. Brooks and his teams of horses. And the first ones were pushing a plow on Montreal Lake. Montreal Lake is a long lake, you know, it must be 75 miles long or something like that. And it's the first horses, there's 4 horses pushing the plow. And then he built little shacks along the highway so the horses could stop and every night and have something to eat, and they'd sleep in the caboose house. And the freighters, they'd have maybe 10 groups of horses behind pulling sleighs, supplying all the stores and gas.
What's a caboose house?
Pardon?
What's a caboose house?
A caboose.
You said a caboose house?
And they had the cabooses.
What is
A
that?
shack on skids, more or less.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
With the
I'm
heater.
sorry.
Yeah, I didn't know.
It's a cabooses, yeah.
With a little stove inside.
That's neat. That's
It
neat.
had runners on the bottom, yeah, yeah. And many people moved up there in those horses, in those cabooses, we called them.
Okay, cool.
And then there was a bunkhouse where the workers could have a sleep when the horses were.
I learned something new today.
I hope it's not just one thing.
No. Well, that stood out for me, I should say.
Thank you very much for
Yeah.
asking. And I'll try and answer as best I can. Yeah.
So did the planes that, you talked about float planes, but did planes fly in there with skis on them so they could?
Oh, yeah, the skis are in the winter.
Yeah.
So there was a period of time in the spring and in the fall when there was nothing.
Right.
In 1911, our first mail was delivered. And it was John Flett pulling a toboggan, and he walked up to Prince Albert, got the mail, got it back. It could take, depending on the time of the year, it could take from 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks to 6 weeks to make a round trip. Go up there, get the mail, pulling a toboggan. So just try that. And John Flett had children up in LaRonge too, and they were going to school there. One of them and my mother lived together with Angus Mackay's family, because the mother, Angus Mackay's wife, was a teacher at the residential school. Okay, so the kids would, my mother was 11 years old, and she'd be carrying the wood and the water and, you know, peel the potatoes ready because he was busy in the store, and et cetera, you know. Then the tourists started coming. My dad had a big house. We had a big home. And so did Dick Hall. He was a prospector, lived on the north end of LaRonge, close where Anglerouen mine was, on the turn off to go towards Stanley Mission. And he was a Liberal member of Parliament, and he would go down to Regina and do, you know, and he was there for quite a few years because he was prospecting, and his brother Gordon came from British Columbia as well. And they were prospectors up there. They first knew the people from the south. Dick knew them because of his being a member of Parliament. And my dad knew the stores in Prince Albert that supplied him with supplies for his little store, you know. And so they said, why don't you get the canoes or something on the lake so we can go fishing? And that's how tourism started, with my dad and Dick Hall, you know. And they slept in they still slept in tents part of the time, and part of the time in my home, or else at Dick Hall's tents. And that's how it started in the 40s, until the road came along. Then all the people came up and they could build little cabins very readily, you know. You could carry doors and build a little cabin for the tourists.
So when did the road come in?
47, December 1947,
Was it
a gravel road,
Right.
and it was on the east side of Montreal Lake. It isn't the present road now, it was on the other side. It went through Molinosa, you know, yes. And that, Peter Downs, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, he's an author from the States. He used to come to Pelican Arrows every year, but he had heard about LaRonge and he decided to come over here. And he was one of the first persons to get a ride out of LaRonge, you know. And lo and behold, he was going with Jack Friesen. Jack Friesen had there was very Swales and Friesens, there were different people. My dad had a truck haul their own freight up, you know, for different people. And this Downs was he had from Pelican to LaRonge, he had come by canoe. Canoe? Or, yes, I guess he did come by canoe. And then they were traveling back. Friesen had 2 trucks, because one truck had to have a little tractor or bulldozer on it, and the other one had the freight on it. But every time they got stuck, they would have to put the planks up, get the Caterpillar or whatever it was, pull the other truck out, you know. They needed 2 trucks to haul one load of freight, because the roads were just terrible. You would just sink into the sloughs, you know. Many horses died on that, you know, because they get stuck in the bog. Yeah. And in 1944, we had, it was during the war, we had the police, not the police, the army come to LaRonge. They walked from Prince Albert. They were training. They were training here. Some of them went to Alaska and some came to LaRonge. I don't know how many there was there in that group, 60 or 100, but they had their own tents. They had all kinds of equipment that the army had, and they had to test it in 50 below weather. So it took them, the soldiers, some on one side were skiing, and on the other side they were snowshoeing. And the road was being built. Like I say, it didn't come through to 47, but they were helping, you know, trees fall down. It was just a little road, and the trees would fall down, so they'd have to clean the highway as they were going along. They had their own tents, and they had several planes as well. And they were doing testing of dropping bombs on how much the weight the lake could hold, the ice would hold. They stayed in LaRonge for about 10 days, and they lived on Morin's Hill, that part of LaRonge. They set up tents in that area, and that's where they were sending big bullets. What is that called? They're about this big onto Kitsaki Island, shooting there, you know. And they did just track, and they sunk a couple of not bulldozers, what are those big ones? Tanks. They sunk them and had to pry them out, you know. They had a lot of, and they built the first bridge across the Montreal River. That's the church, that's a bridge going into, was built by the Army in 1944. So there's a lot of that stuff, and we've got pictures. We got, I don't know how many pictures we got on the Army being there. Oh, I think it was 68, wasn't it? We got from R.B. Peterson.
Could have been, they're not all in there though.
Yeah, they're not all in here, but we picked and choose what we thought was the best. But, and the next, of course, when they left the next year, everybody was going out to the island getting these big bullets, you know. It looked like a big bullet about this one. And they used them as doorstops. You know? So it was quite a deal that when the soldiers were there. The tourism, like I say, when the road came through in the 1950s, the tourism started. We had 15 tourist camps right in the town of LaRonge. 15 tourist camps, each one having at least 2 or 3 cabins, maybe more, and there was only one that had his office in LaRonge, and all his cabins were in Hunter's Bay, because LaRonge people started building in Hunter's Bay for the deep fishing for deep trout. So, you know, and that was Van Bliss from Prince Albert. Yeah, you related to the doctors, eh? Yeah. And we had two schools in LaRonge that burnt down, both burnt down. When the second one burnt down in February 47, in 1940, one of the Indian mission schools had a building that was moved over the fence on, it wasn't part of their land. Everybody that lived in LaRonge were all squatters, you know? Nothing was measured, or everybody just sat there till they did that at a later date. I'll check later. And oh, I lost my train of thought.
Talking about the school.
The school, oh yes. This little school, I went to that school. It was just one room, and her name was Miss Mann. And I wasn't treaty at that time. I wasn't considered treaty, but there was like the nurses' sons, Jim Spooner and John Spooner, and then there was some Olsons and Finlaysons and Sandersons. They were not treaty at that time. None of them were treaty. So they attended the same school, you know, as everybody. And Miss Mann was the first teacher. The second one, 2 years later, was Miss Lemon, and she married Stan Cuthead. Yes, she married Stan Cuthead, the minister, and she taught up there for a while. and then they left. And there was various ministers come around. But then the Indian Mission School, we always called it the Indian Mission School when I was a kid. And it's All Saints Day School, you know? An All Saints School, and the little one was All Saints Day School. That's what they went by. But when that one burnt, some of the students came to our school for a little while, if they lived in town. But most of them came to Prince Albert, you know? That was the end of those schools, you know. And any questions? No? No. Would you like to explain? There are two-way radios coming up and how they were used.
Nothing like being prepared here. I'd have to reread it.
Okay.
There was a gentleman named Ron Hook who worked for years with DNR out of Prince Albert, and he designed and built a series of two-way radios that the trappers all got. So that was something new for the trappers, because now they could talk to each other and to the base stations. They could get the news. The radio stations could get the weather. What's the weather like on your trap line? Well, it's kind of, you know, so there was up-to-date weather information. They could call for a plane if they had an emergency. There are a number of other benefits to that. But a lot of that was tested out of LaRonge and the trap lines around.
And when was that?
They were
What year did that start?
That was in 48.
30s.
Yeah, 48.
30s, 40s.
Well, they started here earlier.
Yeah.
And then they moved to
And
Laurent.
it might have been a little later actually.
Yeah.
DNR was not very well organized in the early days at all. They didn't have uniforms, for instance.
No buildings. They had no.
But DNR was government in the north for a long time. And yeah, that's changed completely. There aren't hardly anybody up there anymore. So I don't.
Yeah. Yes.
Can I say something here? Just, it was a good communication tool, right?
Yeah, very good.
I remember the channels when I was a kid.
Yeah.
If everybody in the whole north was listening to you, and then you would say, okay, meet me at 4610? Or those
Whatever it
codes.
was, yeah.
Yeah.
And everybody would switch over to you because they're listening.
Oh, yeah. It's just like those, it's like the old phones. Everybody listens.
That was the real party line.
That was a real party line. And then CKBI also had two state northern news every day for 15 minutes, which everybody in the north listened to see if planes could fly or whatever news was there.
And they sent out messages to
And
families.
then, yeah,
Like you said, Rosie, meet me
Yeah.
at Tulloch.
yeah. I'm going home to Molinosa. Please come up to my house to pick me up, you know? Right on the highway. Anyhow, there was lots of things going on. Yeah. I had each person that had been there over the years write a little story of why they came there, you know? And like Albert Carlson, you know, and then he married Margaret Roberts, you know, and they would write their little stories. So there's stories written by the people in each section, you know, from the older people there. Yeah, until we did that until up to 1970s. Yeah. So we were trying to, and of course, we cheated a little bit too, you know. We said we were going to quit in 1980. We're not writing anymore. And would you believe Johnny Cash came to LaRonge? We had to blow our horn. He's come there at least 6 or 7 times, you know, and he came with his wife. And this last time he came with his wife, son, and a cousin of his, plus his whole band. And they set up a big show at the Elks
Fairgrounds.
the fairgrounds. And people from all over came to listen to Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
You know, and all that, he did not charge us 1 cent. He didn't charge 1 cent. And we took him and June and their son out to our cabin, and our friends, Mackay's, they stayed at the Mackay's Reds camp. And we were part of the entertainment group. Because I do tell the odd lie. So, anyhow, we entertain them at times, you know, and
Did he come to fish, or how come he came to LaRonge? He came to fish.
he came for fishing, oh yes. And he would go up further north to Foster Lakes, you know, but he was,
At the time, we were fundraising for a new rink,
Okay.
Uniplex.
Yeah.
The concert was to raise
Oh,
money.
wow. So it must have been very successful concert.
oh, it was, I don't know how many hundred people. And then we all got jackets with the, with the jackets.
So
Yeah.
what year was that, 1980?
83, I think.
83,
Okay.
yeah. And,
So we
John-
had to do a few pictures of that.
like I say, I goofed a few times. Jacques Cousteau was also in LaRonge.
Oh,
Yes, and we had a terrible storm, and my husband was down at the dock down where in the church, and he had lost his glasses the day before because our son had been on the lake on a terrible storm. And then, you know, when he was trying to get them to come in, him and another couple of kids or something. And Jim bent over and his good sunglasses went down.
Oh,
And the next day, our other daughter she was good at diving because she used to swim and she took some training. And also, she was diving, but it was so murky because of all the wind. And then this thing came up, you know, a metal thing. And Jim looked, and then he saw him and asked him to, he says, oh, would you mind? Would you mind? I lost my glasses. He said, he noticed he was all in, you know, a diver. Yeah, no problem. And so he came up with a bunch of fish hooks, you know, that were stuck on the rocks. He went back again and came up with the sunglasses. And he was in the water, and I'm John Cousteau, and Jim says, and I'm Jim Hyrniuk. And would you believe we went and had supper with him that night? At Mackay's house, because they had a big motel, you know, and so a lot of people were staying there, so that's how we met Jacques Cousteau. So we had lots of fun doing silly things, you know, but it's all in the book. I wish to tell you that I'm glad to see all these people. We had, I think we've covered anything that might be of use to everybody, you know, as best I could.
We didn't mention the spider.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. All of a sudden, what year was that? 60, a spy plane crashed in Wapaweka. And Wapaweka is just south of LaRonge, just, you know. And when that plane crashed, of course, they had the Mid-Canada dew line was just on the south shore of LaRonge, you know. There was a station there, and the next one, big station was in the Paw area. And of course, Mid-Canada, I think. One was called the dew line, one was called the Mid-Canada line. There was 3 of them. The border to the States and up in, and this plane didn't run out of gas, but it had gone up to 75,000 feet up in the air, and something started going wrong anyhow, and they were forced to land. And they phoned into Cranberry Portage, which is just south of Flin Flon, to notify them. And they said, phone LaRonge and tell the police. The police were over there guarding that spy plane right now. And some people that were supposed to go, they needed somebody to come and fix the plane. And so they were coming from around the Creighton area, where they had a base. And the other ones was to plow the road so that the plane could take off again. And Henry Hegland was hauling freight to Stanley Mission. Well, he said, I got to take this load. No, you got to come immediately. The police said you've got to come immediately. You had to drop everything for the Hudson Bay and leave it there on the ice. And he drove over to Wapaweka Lake with his Caterpillar and plows and plowed an area. They came from there, fixed it within a few hours. They were there. The police were there overnight. They repaired that airplane, took off. Don't tell anybody. But it came on PA Herald. No, just the last couple of years.
Oh,
Just recently. But we knew about it in LaRonge. You know, we've had things happen that don't happen in most little towns. You know what I mean? Very, very interesting things to write about and talk about.
That guy who was called to plow the airstrip was paid quite handsomely, and he went to town and bought a brand new luxury car.
Oh my goodness.
And his wife swung off and went traveling.
Because Henry asked for a couple $100 for this job, you know? American money just came out like that. He went and bought a Lincoln, wasn't it? But they couldn't tell anybody.
Well, presumably it was the Americans, or it was our spy plane. It wasn't like the Russians or something.
No, but they have to fly over LaRonge, over
It was a
Alaska.
friendly spy plane though.
Yes, it was a spy plane over Alaska. So it's all in the book, you know? It's all there in very good detail. Like I jump. And I tell lies.
It's a mixture of
Honest
stories.
lies. Honest lies.
But you're a good storyteller.
Yeah, you are a good spy.
Pardon?
You're a good storyteller.
I don't know about that. The yapper.
So were you and your siblings born on the trap line there?
My mother's,
Were you and your siblings born on the trap line?
no,
Wasn't your
no,
dad the trap line?
no. All 3 of them were born in LaRonge, but then they'd go up, you know. And then my mom had 3, and then 2 passed away in LaRonge. And then I was born, but we were all born right in somebody's house. Right, there was no hospital. You know, that's one thing. When the school burnt down, the president or the principal of the school became our little hospital, you know. And actually, Stan Cuthand's sister was the first nurse there. Yeah, and it's in the book. It's in the book.
You said you don't tell any lies.
That's right.
Well, all right. Tom Roberts on CBC Radio out of LaRonge used to give his 5 minutes to 8 talk every morning.
Yeah.
And they phoned him one day in April and they asked him, how are things in LaRonge, Tom? He said, I can't talk long. The lake's going down. It's disappearing. You know, I have to run to get a bucket of water to brush my teeth. They said, what's going on? He said, somebody opened the gates on the Rapid River. LaRonge is emptying over Nostoyak into the Churchill. And then he said, April Fools.
Well, I've never done anything that bad. So that's about the end of my story. If anybody wants to ask any more questions, or I think I covered a little bit of it. I went to school in Prince Albert here. My 3 brothers, they owned the school in LaRonge. The 3 older ones attended the mission school. That was the only school. I started school in 1940, and they had just started this little school, you know. So I was there, and by then, Mark and John and Kellen were boarding with R.D. Brooks and attending school here. And John, my brother, went from here straight to Esquimalt when the war was on to join, you know, the Navy. And within a year, he just finished all his training. The war was over. Yeah, he didn't have to go. So, and I'm not telling a lie.
That's good, you have your brother. Well, that's good, because you have your brother, you don't have to worry about him being out in the war.
No, they're all gone
Oh,
now.
are they?
You know, when you're 88, I'm 88 years old. So, yes, so
You look healthy for 88.
well, thank you. I'm not telling a lie. My husband's back there with a big beard, he's 90. He has to put up with me. But he drove down this morning from LaRonge. He'll be driving to see his sister in Cudworth, and he's the Ukrainian, but I'm not. And my son is half. Half this and half that, and don't ask me. And every one of our children married.
Oh, yeah.
Everything.
Make sure.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Anne?
How many children did you have?
I had 3. Jim, Kim, and Shauna. And Kim lives in Alberta, St. Albert. She's retired. Jim is the oldest, he's 64. That's my oldest son. And the other one is Shauna, and she lives in north of Toronto. Her husband's a pilot, and he flew for 17 years with the Emirates, a captain on 2 levels. And he took us over to Dubai 2 times. Maybe 3. So we were lucky.
You didn't say anything about Robertson's store.
Oh, they closed. It's in the book.
How much is your, you're selling your book, how much is your book?
40 cents. $40. $40. And there's 526 pages and lots of pictures. And there's a pictures of Robertson, a picture of Johnny Cash, and a picture of, who was the other one that's a very...
Jacques Cousteau.
No, I haven't got a picture. Well, he was on the water. I didn't know I was going to meet him in the evening.
Prince Andrew and Fergie were there.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
I remember that.
Andrew, Prince Andrew, and
Do you know anything about Prince Albert? Like why the city's named Prince Albert? Do you know anything?
Oh, yeah, I can tell you why it's named Prince Albert,
Yeah.
but we'll talk after.
Okay.
But I'd like to thank Anne for coming and sharing her stories. It was fantastic.
oh, yeah.
And Anne's book is for sale. We have it over here. It's $40 for a book, and it's signed by Anne, and it can be signed by Jill if it's not already. And we have lots of cookies and things left, so help yourselves to that. Our next gathering will be Remembrance Day. We'll be open from 1 till 4, free admission, and we'll have a program that day. It's still in the works of being planned out. And our next coffee and conversation will be Saturday, I think it's the 17th, November 17th. And we're also working on Art Peterson. So if you know him, give him a call and tell him that I need an answer from him, because I want him to come and share his stories about working in the fire hall here. So he's 90 years old, and he was just over at what we call the new fire hall, which will be 50 years old soon. And he was there visiting this summer with relatives from Norway, and he said to the fire chief, "I'm not holding you responsible for anything," and he slid down the pole. Nobody's allowed to do that. So we're going to try and get Art to come in and meet with us and share some stories too. But once again, I'd really like to thank these two ladies for coming. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
There we go. You did it. That was awesome.
She's gonna get stabbed. She's such
Isn't that beautiful? The people is a form of, it is. It's recognized as incredible research. You're